Hello, I'm Dr. Chris Thompson from Boston, Massachusetts. I'd like to thank Dr. Paul Kroner and the course organizers for the opportunity to participate in this very interesting session. And my topic is creating effective, efficient, high output, and professional research teams. Here's the agenda. I'd like to start by discussing my experience in research and building teams. We'll then get into team development and some management strategies. I have been in academic practice at Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School for over 15 years. I am the director of endoscopy there. I'm a professor of medicine, and I'm the PI of the developmental endoscopy lab. Over this time, I've had various people in my lab, including engineers, undergraduates from various schools, including MIT, GI fellows, surgical residents, and various other research fellows. I do have 30% protected time, and I've had that for some time now. Had numerous grants and over 300 publications. Over this time, I've done various types of research as well, including some basic research very early on, but then I focused more on clinical research, as seen on the slide, device and procedure development, preclinical large animal work, translational research and first-in-human studies, and larger multi-center RCTs as well. I've also consulted on various industry projects and patent work, have licensed intellectual property and technology to industry, including endoscopic method for gastric bypass in 2005, some endoscopic stents, and an endoscopic simulator. And then I've also founded 6 companies. And the first was Beacon Endoscopic in 2009, which was acquired by Covidien in 2013, GI Windows, and some others as well that are currently underway. And one thing I've learned from these experiences is that each one of these activities requires a different type of team and members with different skill sets. And we're going to touch on this in more detail moving forward. Additionally, a lab group is very different than a research team. This is important to keep in mind. So your core lab may consist of a lab manager, an admin, a study coordinator, and some research students. And this is what really always makes up the core of my lab. Research teams are very different. Now they can fit within the lab and have a few students from the lab and maybe other components, but they're all integral to your lab. Additionally, you can have research teams that rely on outside resources and outside personnel. And these can vary greatly, where some projects might just have 1 or 2 other people that are needed from outside the lab, and other projects might require a larger role from these external resources. And some are completely separate from the lab altogether. Like these are my companies typically. Now someone may leave the lab to join this venture and work within this separate team. And people can, of course, go back and forth between these different groups as well. And these research teams consist of external collaborators, paid contractors, maybe statisticians or vet techs or something like that, external students, and sometimes business partners. So, again, important things to keep in mind when you're building a core lab and also building research teams. So, kind of keys to success, if you will, and we're going to come back to this as well. You want to build a team with the right people. You want to make sure you empower independence in these teams. You'd like to also provide a vision and give them direction and inspire them, of course, to work hard. And these are the keys to success in building these teams and getting them to work efficiently. So now moving on to team development. What's a research team? Well, a research team comprises a group of people working together in a committed way towards a common research goal. Again, this is very different than a lab group, which I've highlighted. And the lab group may have very separate projects going on within it, and there are longer-term positions. In team development, it's important to identify the necessary components and positions that are needed for success. You want to hire these positions, or consider contracting them out for part-time work, or establish collaborations. But you need to identify all of these necessities up front, and you also need to guide the team through the 4 stages of development as quickly as possible. And we start by assembling the necessary personnel. And this depends on if you already have a core lab or not, but if you're going to have several projects going, it's rather important to have a lab manager. You'll need technical and clerical staff. Research students are important to most projects. These include medical students, postdoctoral fellows, clinical fellows, and at times undergraduates. You may rely on co-investigators for some of these research teams, depending on if you have those core competencies. You may share staff or other faculty in the same division as you may want to collaborate on the project and can be helpful. You may have intra or inter-institutional collaborations and team members as well. So what types of personnel are required for which types of projects? Well, research students and clerical staff are necessary for most projects and are typically good to have within the core lab. For clinical research, you may rely on statisticians and sometimes study coordinators. For large animal work, you need vet tech support oftentimes, perhaps anatomic pathologists. For device development, we oftentimes rely on engineers. For randomized controlled trials, you may interface with CROs, and of course, study coordinators are necessary there. And for spinning out companies, you need business partners, CEOs and other people that are used to that type of activity. And whether or not you want to bring these people fully into the lab depends on your funding situation and what other projects you may have for them. So you may choose to have some of these people as full-time lab members, whereas others you may just pay for their activities at a much reduced rate. However you decide to compose this team, it's very important to identify all the necessary roles up front and then bring the necessary personnel in at the appropriate times. You don't want a car running on 3 wheels, and especially in this very competitive environment. You don't want to run out of resources because your timing is off. So that's something to really focus on, and you want to plan everything out meticulously in advance. Once you've selected your appropriate team members, it's important to develop the team. And there's a lot of research around team development. And one of the better defined methods is Tuckman's 4 stages of team development. And we have the forming stage, the storming stage, the norming, and performing stages. And we're going to go through each one of these in detail. The first stage of team development is forming, and this is where team members are first getting to meet each other, or perhaps meeting each other for the first time in regards to this new team. And people will react differently during this phase. Some will be very watchful, assessing other people's abilities. They might be quiet. Some may have anxiety, but they typically are polite and seek to be accepted by the group. And they may treat each other as acquaintances or strangers in this phase as they're trying to feel each other out. As the PI, it's important to facilitate introductions in this early stage and highlight each person's skills and background to help assign roles and get buy-in from the other team members. You brought them in for specific reasons, and it's important to highlight those to get buy-in from the other team members. Team members should be given project details in this stage, and they should help to organize some of the activities, and authorship and reward structure should also be addressed in this first stage. It's most important in this first stage for the PI to be inspirational and create a sense of purpose. They must provide a vision and a sense of urgency. This will motivate the team properly, get wind in their sails, and get them off to a good start, and hopefully help carry them through the next stage, which is where there's the highest risk of failure. And that is the storming phase. So here, members openly share ideas and use this as an opportunity to stand out and be accepted by their peers. They start to communicate their feelings, but still view themselves as individuals rather than part of the team. And they may also resist control of the group leader and show some hostility. And of course, this depends on the individual. Some may be more confrontational. Some may just opt out. There may be conflicts that arise. There might be subgrouping. So this, again, is the highest risk point of the process and most likely where a team may fail. During this stage, the PI must help the team by having a plan in place to manage competition among team members and to help facilitate communication. while making sure the project stays on track. This is the highest risk point of failure, as I mentioned, and you may need to adjust personnel at this point in time. So it's more important to mentor them up and try to get them through this process and maybe adjust roles slightly, but sometimes you do have to let people go or bring other people in. It's also important during this stage to identify and encourage the development of team leaders and to empower the team to function somewhat autonomously, accomplishing the goals that are set for them on their own. The team leader can organize day-to-day business and coordinate activities, but it's not necessary for them to be first or senior author on these projects. And this will also allow you to build multiple teams, provided you really can make them fairly autonomous. If they make it through the storming phase, the third stage is norming. And by now, people have figured out that they can work together within the team. There's less internal competition. Responsibilities and goals are fairly clear. They confront issues together. There's better listening, more cohesion. People feel part of the team. They realize they really can work together and they accept each other's viewpoints. As a PI, your responsibility diminishes during this phase and the team leaders are taking more active roles. The PI still provides goal setting and oversight, but the teams will not require direct supervision. And finally, the fourth stage is performing, and this is our goal. We want to get the teams to performing as quickly as possible and keep them there as long as possible. This is where there's a high level of cohesion and trust between team members. Teams are functioning at peak efficiency. Less oversight is required. Issues still do come up, but by this point, teams have strategies for resolving problems without compromising timeliness or progress. The members are close and supportive. There's openness, and there's less concern about the hierarchy. And this is kind of a good example out of F1 pit crew here, where everyone's doing what they need to do. They're doing their job, and they're doing it very efficiently. And this is kind of our goal, just to keep this image in mind. Now, as a PI here, you almost want to stay out of the way, but you still do need to do some goal setting and some oversight. The main thing you're doing, however, is you're looking for groupthink and you're trying to prevent that. So with cohesion, the danger is they'll stop challenging each other, and you do still want them to have that energy and not become complacent. So that's one thing to keep an eye on in this very efficient stage. Moving on to management strategies. So in addition to team members having different primary functions, members will have different soft skills, as I've already mentioned this. And they may have different experience levels, motivations, aspirations, personality types, communication styles, and disciplinary backgrounds. So it's important for the PI to understand these things in selecting the team, but as you get to know them better, you want to use these to properly motivate people and maybe adjust their roles within the team so that the team can run more efficiently and effectively. Additionally, over time, team members may leave the core lab and go to be part of another research group, but you may still collaborate with them. And there's other people that may be coming into the lab and then, of course, into the research team. So it's very important to get them up to speed as much as possible and not to disrupt the team when that happens, especially if it's functioning in that stage 4 where it's really performing well. And the main goal here is, once you get a team performing, to prevent regression, because that can certainly happen, right? With changing of personnel, or even just as the project goes on and runs into road bumps and problems, you can get regression. So you're constantly on the lookout for this, because during the storming phase, this is when the team is least effective. And you really want to move out of that and into performing and keep it there the best you can. In conclusion, our keys to success: it's important to build teams that have the necessary personnel and to identify those roles in advance. You want to make sure whether or not they're part of the core lab or external to the lab, you bring these members into the team at the appropriate times, and you get to understand their strengths and weaknesses and make modifications as needed. It's also important for the PI to provide a vision and goals and inspiration. This will properly motivate the team and hopefully get them through that dangerous second phase and get them running efficiently as soon as possible. You want to empower the teams, identify team leaders, and get them running fairly autonomously. This will allow you to be able to build multiple teams and run several projects simultaneously. And the PI still will provide oversight and keep teams goal-directed as their main function once these teams are running efficiently. Thank you for your attention.